Hey, how's it going, everybody, and welcome back into the SFS channel. My name is Gavin, and in today's episode, we'll be talking 5 must-start running backs here for Week 15 action, the Level 1 Fantasy Football Playoffs. So, a lot of important lineup decisions to be made here for this week, as obviously it is now make or break time, and every loss now means that you are eliminated and no longer in the competition for that league championship. So, today we're talking 5 names that aren't necessarily huge top of the list running backs that could potentially be big time lineup contributors and give you those dependable points you need to get the job done this week. So with that being said, let's hit the intro and let's get started. All right, so the first name on the list today, and probably the most dominant player that we'll be covering in today's episode, at least recently, is James Conner of the Arizona Cardinals. Now, this has been a very, very impressive season for Conner, who has been a touchdown machine all year, and especially in the absence of Chase Edmonds, since he's been placed on the injured reserve. Now he'll be returning. We'll talk about that in a second here. He has been fantastic for fantasy, and he has given us great production. The touchdown numbers have been off the charts, as I said, and he is continuing to show off his skill set here in these recent games and why he is potentially a strong play week in and week out. Now, the reason we're putting him in the episode today, the reason that I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that some of us might be starting James Conner, is because of the return of Chase Edmonds. Now, this is something that I spoke on a little bit last week. I talked about how I thought that in the first game back for Chase Edmonds, it wouldn't necessarily be back to 100% full involvement in the offense and back to his full touch count again in that debut performance. And believe it or not, Chase Edmonds doesn't suit up for the game. The Cardinals choose to keep him on IR an extra week. So now we're faced with that same situation that we were looking at last week here for this Week 15 game. So the schedule for the Cardinals this week is the Detroit Lions. On paper, that's a fantasy goldmine for the running back position. And what I like even more here moving into Week 15 now, that we didn't necessarily see all that much throughout James Conner's career to this point, or even throughout this season in a more specific lens here, is the dominance he's had as a receiving back. He isn't thought of as someone who is a dynamic, two-phase, pass-catching capable player that can hurt defenses in multiple ways. But he's had multiple one-handed catches this season. Very, very impressive on both of those. One of those came this past Monday night against the Rams. And he's also shown us throughout some other games. The San Francisco 49ers matchup was another one that Conner was able to be an effective pass catcher, that he really can be a three-down back. He can be someone that is uber effective, used in a dynamic role for this Cardinals offense. So now that we're seeing him used in that light, projecting his involvement going forward becomes even more advantageous and even more encouraging. We're talking about a player that had 31 yards rushing. That's not a very high total, and 2 rushing touchdowns against the Rams on Monday evening, but he caught 9 of his 9 targets for 94 yards receiving. So even though Chase Edmonds is returning, the anticipation that his workload won't immediately return to 100% of what it was pre-injury, and the fact that I don't want to call him a backup per se, because they were really a 50-50 split in 2 players who had very differing roles in this offense. Chase Edmonds was the clear-cut change of pace back, the receiving player, and James Conner was the short down and distance power back. I think we might see James Conner eat more and more into Chase Edmonds' workload, because he's been dominant playing the role that Edmonds played pre-injury. Now, there is something to keeping your players fresh, to divvying up the touch count between various players and keeping everyone healthy. But the way James Conner has been playing has certainly earned him more snaps and more touches in this offense. And again, a fantasy goldmine. We've hardly even talked about the Detroit Lions matchup here. This is a circumstance I think James Conner can yet again be easily a top 12 play at the running back position. Elijah Mitchell against the Atlanta Falcons is my next matchup here on the board, or my next player in that matchup against the Falcons here. Mitchell was out last week. He was in concussion protocol early in the week. They also had some talks of some knee aggravation. However, this is obviously based upon the hope that he is available, that he has he has improved his health, and that he will be available for us to play in this offense this week. The last time that the 49ers were on the field against the Bengals, it was not exactly the most productive output in the rushing department. We saw Jeff Wilson Jr. carry the football 13 times for 56 yards, but it was the passing game that was really utilized in that contest. We saw San Francisco become more and more pass dependent and become more reliant on that phase of the game. We still saw a little bit of Deebo Samuel in the backfield, but overall it's been George Kittle for back-to-back games here, having ridiculously large performances. And that's not the type of football that this team wants to play. So you're talking about potentially getting your lead back in the offense, in the lineup this week. That would be huge for this team, and obviously fantasy managers alike, because of what Kyle Shanahan does for the running back position and the numbers that the players in the limelight of that role are able to produce. So Eli Mitchell could easily be a top 15, 16 play if he's out there because of the workload he'll receive on the ground, the increase in volume he's received as a pass catcher out of the backfield, especially as of late in the second half of the season here as well. Again, this one comes down majorly to health of Elijah Mitchell as the player. We're hoping he can be out there, and if he is, this should be another opportunity for some very nice numbers. How about Javonte Williams? He is continuing his hot streak of football games. With Melvin Gordon in the lineup, he continued his hot streak of success. Now, Melvin Gordon, I will also acknowledge, is another fantastic play for me this week. He will crack the top 24 rankings of the running back position here. But it comes down to this. I like Javonte Williams more as a talent, and I think he's able to be more effective and more productive with every touch he's given. Now, Melvin Gordon is still a very capable player. He's still someone that I would trust carrying the football if I was an NFL team. Maybe not in a three-down workhorse fashion, but he is still, again, a very, very solid and quality runner in this league. Javonte Williams, though, looks like an absolute beast when he's out there. He has everything it takes to be a three-down playmaker for this offense. He has vision. He has patience when running and waiting for offensive linemen to move defenders out of the way. He has the ability to push through and after contact is made, continue to rack yards up. He's a super talented player, and right now he is also the healthier of the two backs. Now, Melvin was able to return last week. He did have somewhat of a hand issue throughout that game. That was nothing that was going to keep him out of the competition, though. But Javonte is the fresher, younger player here, and I believe that although Melvin Gordon did carry the rock more times than Javonte did this past weekend, Javonte is going to continue to have fantasy success here. He's got 4 touchdowns in his last 3 games, and he has 17.5 or more fantasy points, again, 3 weeks in a row. So you're looking at positive games. He's stacking one after the next. You're getting, again, that elite talent or potentially elite talent. It looks like he's got all the skill sets to make a very, very productive fantasy back. You get yourself a matchup against the Cincinnati Bengals here that have been allowing a lot of yards after contact to running backs. I think that, again, both of these players could be very productive plays here, and if you're looking for someone to fulfill that RB2 position, Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon are both very quality options, but I wanted to zone in on Javonte here because I think that he has the higher upside of the two in the group. And then David Montgomery here of the Chicago Bears. This is another player that I like the matchup, and I love the situation, not necessarily in the fact that he plays for the Bears, but the way that the Bears use him. He is their three-down workhorse, and he is a very overlooked workhorse in the fantasy realm. This isn't a high-flying, explosive offense that hangs points on the board every week, but this is a player that gets the requisite touches to put up quality points. It just comes down to him getting enough of those valuable touches, whether that be receiving opportunities, goal line opportunities. David Montgomery can do it all. He had 10 rushes, just 42 yards against Green Bay. And what I will say, coming from a Packer fan, was a very odd game to watch. The majority of Chicago's production came from special teams. And when you're talking about a team with Jakeem Grant and the things that he was doing in that contest, it was a lot of fantasy misfits putting up random points here and there. Damiere Byrd had a long touchdown as well. It was an odd day for the Chicago Bears, but they did manage to score. I believe they cracked 30 points. I think the final score was 45-30 there. But David Montgomery, at the end of that game in garbage time, was able to come out and catch 6 passes for 39 yards. So there you go, finding ways to get those valuable touches. And like I said, this is a dynamic 3-down player. He does everything for this Bears offense and is certainly a capable pass catcher, which is huge when we're discussing players who at the running back position can be relied upon as RB2s. This week, he's got Minnesota up on the docket. The Vikings are coming off of a very, how do I want to describe this? It was a game where if you were a Vikings fan, you had to hold your breath last Thursday. They do have a long week of preparation for Chicago here, but they almost blew that 29-point lead to start things against the Steelers. However, I think the Bears come into town. There's always something to division games, and not only the NFC North, but every division in football, those rivalry games. When teams don't stack up as well on paper, they always seem to compete a little bit closer to one another just because of the chippiness, the physicality. Everything gets raised to the next level now. This is something that's not very tangible, but you just kind of see it out there, with the exception of when Tom Brady ran the NFC East and he just smoked all those teams. Everyone else seems to play a little bit more tight-knit and to have really competitive football games. So I expect the Bears to stay and hang in this one between 7 to 10 points here. And that's a margin in which you'll be able to run the football for 3.5 quarters of this game. So if you can find the end zone, get a few passing opportunities, and make some of these explosive runs with the fantastic talent he has to utilize for, obviously, himself, David Montgomery should be a very, very, again, quality RB2 for this week. And then the last one here is Darrell Henderson of the LA Rams. This one is becoming more and more interesting to me now. This is obviously Darrell Henderson / Sony Michel. It depends if Darrell Henderson is actually even going to be available and out there on the field for us to start this week. However, whichever back is out there, whoever's the lead for this offense has the best or one of the best matchups in fantasy for the running back position in the Seattle Seahawks. They are terrible at stopping opposing fantasy running backs. They're ranked 31st right now, so pick your poison between them and number 32. But teams have been having success against us all year. Some of my best picks and my safest picks of the week have been picking against this Seahawks unit, and especially with their best player arguably on defense outside of Bobby Wagner, Jamal Adams, out for the season, they're even weaker in terms of that being a box safety role that can come up and stuff the run game and fit really well. So Darrell Henderson's going to have every opportunity here. The Rams are currently getting smoked with COVID cases, I believe, between just Monday and Tuesday. This video is coming out Thursday morning and being recorded late Wednesday evening. So I'm not exactly sure what the total tally for COVID cases on Wednesday night was, but between Monday and Tuesday, I think it was 75 players. And today we lost Baker Mayfield, Troy Hill, John Johnson, a handful of other Browns, and like I said, OBJ tested positive. So potentially some things to watch. D-Hop, another announcement here. We're getting off task here, but D-Hop is likely out for the remainder of the regular season. That's another big loss. To me, that makes Christian Kirk and A.J. Green some interesting options for flex plays here down the stretch. But a lot of bad stuff is happening right now. I hate to see fantasy playing out the way it is. And I was listening to some sports talk shows, and they were talking about how some NFL execs expected this season to be a lot more of a COVID year than even last year was, because players are now not necessarily confined to, I'll put this in quotations, but that bubble type format where everyone was really locked up last year, not able to go out and do things. And now that players are able to freely go as they choose, especially if they're a vaccinated player, they're not necessarily immune to contracting the virus. So you're seeing a lot of players get hit hard right now all across sports. It's not what you want to see, especially at the end of the year. It's just kind of an unfortunate time to see all this playing out. I mean, NBA is getting hammered, NHL is getting hammered. If you guys watch hockey, I'm sure that I don't have too big of an audience that also crosses over to hockey, but there's a lot of struggles going on right now, so keep your fingers crossed. I'm hoping for all of your guys' teams that we're not losing key players. I mean, it would really stink to see, some of fantasy's top names go out and get sick and whatnot. I mean, Christian McCaffrey has been injured basically half of this season, and he managed to test positive as well. So even if CMC had managed to stay healthy, he would still be out because he would have COVID right now. So it's a complete mess. There is a lot of things going not the right way for fantasy managers out there. So let me know down in the comments, who have you lost through COVID this year or this week? Keenan Allen was a big one last week, probably one of the biggest names to date, but obviously having a team starting quarterback, Baker Mayfield out, not necessarily a fantasy superstar by any stretch of the imagination, but someone still who has a lot of impact. Jarvis Landry, another name. As I talk more about them, they're coming back to me here. So a lot of players are missing, in particular the Rams. The Browns have gotten hit really hard. I think the Cardinals had a few positive tests. I would have to double check that, but it's been a rough week. Hopefully we can finish this thing off strong, get into Sunday with a lot of players playing, and hopefully with it being Tuesday and Wednesday when these guys are testing positive, even the Monday group of players, if they're vaccinated, they'll have the opportunity to have those 2 back-to-back negative tests, and then they can maybe play. So who knows? If you want updates and insight on that stuff, join the SFS community Discord. That is in the description of today's episode, and you guys can join that up for free. I'll be putting up news and flash updates whenever random stuff like this happens. Random chats, complaining, whatever it is. We do a lot of stuff in there. So all that's fine and dandy. Darrell Henderson, I guess anything I want to say before we get on out of here for today's episode. It's a fantastic matchup. The Seahawks are the 31st ranked unit against the run. And then the Rams have been overall just running the football more. They looked good in the stretches that they did run the ball. Sony Michel was able to break off a few 10-plus yard runs. One of them went for 24 yards, I believe. So all great stuff to see, and they were without their right tackle, Rob Havenstein, who was another player that contracted COVID. Jalen Ramsey was out on Monday night. It's been a mess. So that's the moral of today's video is just hope your players don't get COVID. That's how you win your fantasy league this year. Just kidding, but maybe not. Interesting way to wrap up today's episode, but hopefully you guys enjoyed my little spree there. Yeah, so thank you guys so much. If you have questions about your lineups this week, feel free to put that stuff down in the comment section below. Happy to help you guys out. I want to be a tool and a resource for all of you, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.